Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Meeting on the Bridge with Sue and Sandy. And today we are starting on our series of grief and loss. And we're going to go through the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grieving. And we're going to kind of tell our stories. And I think one thing that I want to remind everybody of, it isn't just about somebody dying and the loss of a person. Sometimes it's the loss of a job. Sometimes it's the loss of a lifestyle, or I know with myself and with Sandy, some of it's been about functional, losing your functionality in some areas. And so it's, you can be grieving about just about anything. And until you process through it and these stages help you, it you don't receive healing. And you might not ever heal from it, but at least you will be working on healing. So this is season 5, episode 2. And Sandy, I know you've got a wonderful quote for us to start.
So this quote is from Michael J. Fox. Many of you know who that is. He was an actor who ended up with Parkinson's in his late 20s, and his life changed dramatically. This is his quote: "Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding that something is what it is, and there's got to be a way through."
Okay, thank you. That's a very assuring quote, and I love the word acceptance. And the other A word that goes along with that is adaptation. How do I adapt to it?
Right.
So,
right.
Okay. So Sandy, I know you're going to kind of open us up and then start with your story. So go ahead, please.
Okay, let's take a look at the 5 stages of grieving on our next. Okay, there is 5 stages of grieving that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about, but they actually have added some other stages on, but we're going to just talk about the 5 right now. One of the things that I thought about that is not on this list is when you are going into an unknown situation, I think there's a fear factor that you don't know how it's going to turn out. What is the result going to be? But the original 5 that she talked about was number 1, denial. Not believing it's actually happening. When you finally realize it is happening, can be anger. Out of that can be bargaining, where you're bargaining with God, you're bargaining with whatever situation, hoping that it will just be better. That can turn into depression, and then at the end it can become acceptance. The original concept was surrounding death and dying. However, we all face challenges in life that can create the need to grieve. This outline that Elizabeth developed doesn't mean that we go through all stages in this order, or however we experience bits and pieces in our timelines of grieving. Mm-hmm. And how does this affect you? We're wanting to have a conversation, meeting on the bridge, hearing your story, sharing our story, and finding ways to be able to support each other in our podcast. So that's what this is about.
Okay, that's great. So Sandy, why don't you give us an example of one of your losses that, has kind of, that you've sort of gone through some of these stages?
Well, I kind of made up a timeline, Sue, as to some things that I worked through as a kid and then as an adult. And I think maybe I'll share that, and then we'll go back and be able to say, how did I go from there? Where did we go from that point in time? So when I was a child, when I was a 4th grader, my parents split and got a divorce, which it was unusual at that time. Divorces are more prevalent nowadays, but back then I was the only kid who was from a split home. I grew up and ended up getting married at the age of 20. And at 28, I became a single parent, having to go through a divorce. And at that time, I had a 4-month-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And I had to figure out what I was going to do for the future of my children. in that same year, my mom passed away from cancer. So a lot of things going on in my life at that point. Ended up getting remarried, and I've been married to a wonderful man for the last 39 years. We ended up combining families. We have 5 children. I had 3 biological, and he had 2 biological. And so many times, as you realize, blessings can also have challenges. So you're still working through a lot of stuff when you're making those kinds of life decisions and choices. So we were getting ready for retirement. Richard worked in the medical field, and he had to get his flu shot every year to be able to work in the hospital where he was at. When he was a year out of retirement, he had started stumbling and falling and having tremendous pain in his back. We went to the doctor to see about getting shots up and down his spine. And the doctor said, you're losing capacity. There's something else going on. The long and short of it is that he spent 10 days in the UW Medical Center up in Seattle, running all kinds of tests to find out what they thought could be the problem. He had lost 40 pounds in 2 months, and he was miserable. He was hurting so bad. The result was that they believe he has chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, which is called CIDP, the acronym. We didn't know what that is it's an autoimmune disease where the sheath is being destroyed. It's your body is attacking itself. And what happens is the sheath around the nerve is destroyed. So then your nerves are arcing and you're having these terrible jolts and pain. They guessed that it could be possibly reaction from the flu shot. And they said, don't get any more flu shots. We don't know what for sure this is brought about from, but we think this could be it. And he was just miserable, and he would be, from a 1 to 10 scale, he would be an 8 in pain with all the meds on board. So he came home, and we didn't know how long it would take for us to get, if there would be any healing process or what this would be involving. Would it move up higher on his body? Would there be bigger issues than what we had with his legs losing their mobility? The long and short of it is that we came to acceptance of what we needed to do and have a game plan as to what we needed to change. So at the very beginning, talking about the stages, so let's go ahead and go at denial. Turn to the denial one.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
So that's where you just, number one, you're frightened. You're thinking, what is this? What's going on? Is my husband dying? What's going to happen as a result of all of this? And you kind of go into an automan ability to just go day by day without even really thinking about what you're doing. You just, an ottoman kind of in shock and numb, and you keep thinking this can't be happening. I was going to the hospital every day to be there for him and with him. It just, it was not knowing how the end result was going to be, but just doing what you had to do to survive. So I would say that you go into a survival mode.
Did that numbness stay with you for a while, or just while he was in the hospital, or what would you say? When did you move to a different stage?
I think that I probably was there for quite a while. Well, part of it is, again, that you do not know what the results are going to be. So you keep thinking, well, he can heal. He can heal. He can get well. This is just a bump in the road. We're gonna turn a corner here pretty soon. And I think that in that way that it's being hopeful, but I think it comes back down to denial of not really seeing it for what it is. But a lot of it is because you don't know what it is.
Right. They can't give you any definitive answers.
Right.
So it kind of forces you to stay in denial, which I don't know, it's kind of hard. Sometimes it's better to have a diagnosis, just because you have some steps.
Right.
Mhm. So
So,
did you move into another one next, or did you pop back and forth?
well, I remember bargaining with, I did a lot of praying during that time saying, please heal Richard, God, please heal him and help him regain his strength and that kind of thing. So I had some bargaining. I don't think that it really came to reality for me until we came home and had to start adjusting our house, making changes on the house. That was saying, yeah, we need to set the home up so that he can get in and out. At that point, when we first brought him home, he wasn't in a wheelchair, but he came to the point of needing to be in a wheelchair. And so we needed to build ramps and had to make adjustments to the house. There was a lot of dreams that went to the wayside. Richard had a couple of motorcycles, and he was wanting to, in his retirement, drive all over the United States and do bike trips with his buddies, and that was part of his dream, and he had to let go of that. We ended up having to sell the motorbikes, and we had some property in Republic that we decided to sell because he wasn't going to be able to go there and be able to move around and do what he needed to do.
So, thinking of depression and also anger, did you have to help Richard through did you experience him having to deal with his anger and also depression?
No, Richard was really a courageous guy through all of this. And I remember asking one time, I was still working, I hadn't retired yet. And I remember asking him, do you just ever just scream? You're here by yourself. And the pain was still terrible. And at this point now, he's turned a corner and he's really doing much, much better as far as pain control and that kind of thing. But yes, he said, sometimes he would yell out, and just because there's nobody here to bother, but he would try to get some of that emotion out of his system because it was really difficult for him to deal with all the changes in his life, not feeling good on top of all the other changes that have to happen. You don't have the patience or the wherewithal when you're hurting to be nice sometimes. Right. But he's been a trooper when it came to all of the things that happened over the last 5 years.
Well, I think earlier when we talk about anger, usually the root of anger is fear.
Yeah.
And talk to me about, did you ever go through some places where maybe you weren't so angry, but you were fear of changes, fear of what's going to be next? That type of thing.
I definitely did. I felt angry, and the anger doesn't have to make any sense. It wasn't my husband's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. But anger doesn't have to make sense. But you can be angry about the changes that are happening because of that. And there were some tough days where it just hit me, and I wasn't expecting it. I like to consider myself a nice person, but there was times when I know my patience was not as good as it should have been, or that I wasn't as kind and thoughtful because I was feeling these emotions and not knowing what to do with them.
Right. And I think fear kind of can show itself as anxiety too.
Right.
You all of a sudden you feel anxious, and then of course you can't be as even tempered as you'd like to be.
Right.
And so you need to think of strategies. But anger, maybe not so much fear, but anger is an emotion that isn't as socially acceptable as fear. You know what I mean? Right. And so sometimes we swallow it. And sometimes it's good to, beat a pillow or something to be angry because it helps release it. But oftentimes we're not very good at it.
Well, people around you don't understand what you're going through. And I never thought about caretakers and what it involved. You know, you'd see people with their person helping them out. You just don't think about it till you're there, and then you realize that it's involving everybody in the situation, and even your family members don't always understand because they're not living it. They're observing it, and there's a difference between those two things.
Well, and you not only experience having to do new things that you don't know how to do, but you also have, if you're the caregiver and you're also the mate, you have this overarching sense of worry. You know, are they going to fall? Are they going to be able to do that? Am I doing what I need to be doing? Because I'm not a professional.
Well, there's an inadequacy.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, there's certain things that he did around the house, and he's done a lot to figure out how he can make it work, because we have to kind of support each other at this point. But yeah, the process of it was not easy.
No, it's not. And then the overarching burden of all of a sudden being responsible for another person, you know, that's got to be hard on you.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
so
it's hard for him to ask, you know, I think guys especially, it's hard to ask for help, and you want to do it on your own.
Yeah, it's hard to give up that autonomy you have when you're fully functional.
Right.
And then you'll all of a sudden realize that you can't do certain things. You know, that's very true. So what would you say? I mean, this is ongoing for you.
Right.
What would you say to somebody who is working through either something similar or some of these stages that we've talked about? Do you have any?
I was just listening to a podcast by Dr. Henry Cloud, and he's a psychologist, and he talked about the fact of finding somebody who is safe that you can talk it through with. Helps because we loop things through our mind. The story loops and loops and loops, and we have a hard time coming to an understanding or an acceptance of what has happened and letting it go. And he was saying that when you can share your story with a safe person, that does a lot in untangling the emotions that are involved with trauma that happens in your life. And, you know, you mentioned it once before when we were starting the podcast, but there's so many things in life. One of the reasons why you and I decided to do this is that it's not just about death and dying. It can be about end of relationships. It can be a change of employment. It can be health changes or aging and changes of capacity, loss of community, or financial trauma. So there's a lot of things in our world. And as I said before, it doesn't always have to be a negative thing that happens, even things that seem really good. There's still a grieving process. For instance, if you're leaving an area a place that you've worked for years and you've built relationships, but you find a job that's going to be better, that sounds like a real positive, but there's still the grieving that goes through.
Yeah.
You go through with all of that.
Right. And I like to remind people that, I mean, especially if you're going into a situation, well, new job is a good example, but going into a caregiver role and that you've never done before, you have to stop for a minute and think about what you need to. You know, yes, you need to help the other person. However, you need to think of Maslow's hierarchy and what do you need to feel safe?
Right.
I mean, you know, so, you know, do you need to set up a space in the house that's yours? You know, do you need to buy yourself flowers every week so that brightens you up? I mean, think of some things that will make you feel safe, because you won't get to a functional place unless your safety needs.
Exactly.
And your community needs. You know, who do you need to talk to? Who do you need to lean on? And having that safe, supportive person is very important. And sometimes if you don't have one, you can reach out to the mental health community and find somebody who is safe to talk to.
Right.
You need to do that because it's a basic human need. And then, you know, the person who's suffering needs to do that too. You know, you need to have a space.
I've done counseling in pivotal times of my life, off and on. And it really does help you unpack what's going on in your life. And they don't tell you what to do, but they help you find answers because you are processing it with them, and they just ask you the right questions. And oftentimes we come up with the answer on our own. We've got it in our soul, but we just haven't unpacked it. We haven't talked it through.
Well, and so many of us, I know I'm guilty of this, it's just part of me, is I swallow things, so if something's new and different, rather than processing it, I just kind of swallow it.
Yeah.
And if I start to get anxious, then I know that there are certain things that you can do to help stop, and even a breathing technique, or just some sort of thing to stop you from ruminating on whatever it is you're anxious about, and train your brain to think about something else, because that usually calms the anxiety.
Well, and the acceptance one that we're looking at right now, what has happened is that my hubby and I have come up with different dreams. We had to let go of some of the dreams, getting rid of our little cabin over in Republic, and, him having to sell his motorcycles and adjusting. He's gotten a van now that he has hand controls, so he has some opportunities to just be independent on his own. And we went on a cruise in the fall and with some friends, and it turned out to be a great time, lovely time. I mean, there's things that you can work around and do that you don't think at the time you can do. And that's, I think, part of that acceptance. My newest or my latest thing here is that a couple months ago, I got diagnosed with Parkinson's. I was trembling and trying to figure out what's going on. I had a lot of fatigue. So I'm processing that. And I'm not sure that I have gone through these steps yet. I think maybe there's a part of me that's denial. And they say, Parkinson's you do not get well from Parkinson's. But, I believe I am a person of faith, and miracles happen. But I also know that those miracles can be just living day in and day out with the reality of what you're doing or what you have in your life right at this point in time. So you have to be open to how. I don't think I feel angry. I think I feel relieved that we finally have a diagnosis, because I haven't felt myself for the last couple of years, and nobody had any answers, and they ran tests on me and stuff and couldn't come up with anything. So like you said earlier, sometimes it's nice just to have a label on something so that you can kind of it helps you make a game plan, I think.
Yeah, and then any fear of the unknown, you've got some baby steps to try and get good at noticing, how am I feeling today? Right. And choosing to be grateful and joyful in the moment, rather than thinking 5 years out and, thinking of the worst thing. But that's a process, and it's not easy.
Right. And I think a lot of life is like that, is making choices. I think love is a choice. I think attitude is a choice. But it doesn't mean that you don't go through these things, and it doesn't make you a bad person. We've talked about the fact that in our society, grieving is not welcome by others. They don't know what to do with it. And so it's difficult. How do you do it in a way that gets you through to the other side?
Mm-hmm. That's true. So anything else you want to say before I embark on my turn?
I think when we have a safe place to share our story, it helps with the healing process. And I hope that's what we are accomplishing by doing this podcast.
Right. And not only are people sharing their stories and it's helping them, but for people that are watching, listening to your story, whatever it is helpful. You don't know how that's going to be helpful. Right. And then we do, if you contact us through the website, we can have a conversation with you. We're here. We're not therapists, but we are coaches, and we're good listeners. So, yeah. All right. So my turn.
Yes. Share with us about you.
Yeah. So my story is for the last almost 5 years, well, about 5 years ago, I had major reconstructive back surgery. I had been bent over and in horrible pain probably 5 years before that. And I worked and I, did what I needed to do, but I was in a lot of pain. The pain meds only went so far. And so finally, I decided to go ahead with this major surgery. And they repaired some vertebrae in my lower back, and they went all the way up to my chest with, I call it my cage, but I have lots of screws and bolts in me. And I came out of that surgery, had a complication of pulmonary embolism right after they did my surgery. So that's why I have such a scratchy voice. And went into a nursing home for about 6 weeks and, was not walking by the time I left. But I was out of pain and I was taller. Even though I couldn't stand up, I was taller. My back was straight. I wasn't leaning to the side like I was before. And so I was very grateful that I wasn't in pain. And then I was very grateful that, I could sit upright, and got sent home. And it was just, I want to say it was a nightmare because we were not ready. We had not been prepared, and we didn't prepare, I guess, for what kind of care I needed at home.
Because you didn't know. That's the thing. You didn't know.
No. And I think sometimes the doctors, you have all the written sign-off forms about what might happen. But, I'm very much an optimist, and I was thinking, I'm going to get through this.
Right.
And so I'm thinking that actually is sort of denial.
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't want to get fearful. I knew that I was going to heal. And I'm healing, but it's taken a really, really long time. But it was really a burden on my husband. I mean, we had to get equipment to move me around because I couldn't get out of bed at first. And, it was just a nightmare. And so I don't even know at that point if I was angry. I would say I'm angrier now that I didn't know. I wish that I could be a part of helping people prepare for what it's going to be when you get home, because it doesn't seem like anything's good at that. I mean, you have to really dig for information.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the last 4 years I've been in a wheelchair. I got to the point a couple of months ago where I could walk for an hour a day, in increments with my walker. And, I was getting in and out of the car fine. And then all of a sudden, my good leg, my leg that was stronger and more awake than my other one, my right leg, gave out. And I no longer had strength in that leg. And so I went to a knee doctor, and he said that I needed knee replacement to help that leg get stronger. So I was really looking forward to that. So just as I was starting to schedule that surgery, my shoulder went out. And so, to recover from knee surgery, you need to be able to
transfer.
Get up. Yeah, transfer. And so I'm still, anyway, one thing after another. So we're getting to the point of laughing at what the next thing is. And so I've been having PT on my shoulder, and it's helped. I can transfer. But then I didn't, a couple weeks ago, I didn't get cleared. I mean, my pre-op found something else that they wanted to check out before they scheduled me for surgery. So I find out about that tomorrow. And so everything's on hold. And I don't think I am in a bargaining stage, not depressed about it. I'm just kind of like, okay, Lord, what's up for me today? It's
right.
kind of like I'm trying to do. I'm really looking forward to having a new knee so that I have a strong leg again, because that's really going to help me in whatever, however my nerves decide to wake up.
Right.
But anger, I would say disappointed more than angry, which for me is probably big because I'm an anger swallower.
Right.
Fear, I don't think I'm too fearful. Bargaining, yeah, Lord, how long is too long?
Right.
That kind of thing. But I don't think I've done that. Not really depressed. Once in a while, I get anxious, and I have learned some techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And me being the person I am, my anxiety comes out in being short with myself and with people. You know
Right.
what I mean?
You just feel grumpy, and you don't even know why you feel grumpy.
Right. I'm crabby, yeah. And I'm very much, luckily I sleep really well. And I get up at 5 a.m, but boy, after 6 o'clock at night, I just kind of go to bed.
That's your twilight zone.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it just is what it is. I just need to get away or something. But sometimes about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I start getting crabby. Right. And I did have a call-in therapist for a couple of months that really helped me with some strategies. But it's kind of funny because when I would talk to her, I would describe some of the tools, Sandy, that you and I have used, the self-differentiation. So, and she used to tell me, she says, you've already got a toolbox. I know, but I need to remember to use them.
Yeah, you just needed to be able to bounce it off on somebody.
Yeah.
Sue, you had mentioned before that also your mom passed away, and you talked a little bit about that. Can you share a little bit of that story?
Sure. During my time where I was pretty crippled and just burdened with pain, my mom needed a caregiver, and I had a kind of a part-time caregiver, but I was the overarching caregiver. I, checked in on her every day, and it got to the point though that probably at least 3 to 5 years before I put her in a home, not a nursing home, but a private place. I probably should have gotten her into something earlier, and she didn't want to go, which is typical. And I know that I should have been stronger and said, Mom, you need to go.
But she's your mom, so you still are trying to be the kid.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I just didn't do it. And I regret that simply because she had a really good caregiver, but she couldn't be there all the time. And she was kind of isolated. And, I saw that stuff, but I wasn't in any shape to, I kind of let myself go and go and go. I kind of did. If I got I was angry. Because I was angry with myself, and I was angry with her for getting old.
Right.
I got depressed and anxious and didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Blamed myself, but didn't do anything about it. And so, yeah, I mean, it took me a really long time to process through. My mom was just getting old, but I was angry at her.
Right.
And that, so I really took me a long time to forgive myself for that. Mm-hmm. And, I still work through that. Sometimes it's not totally gone, but boy, and I had friends that told me, Sue, you just need, and I'm an only child. And that was hard too, because I didn't have a sibling to support me. Right. I didn't feel good enough about talking to other people about it. My husband and my mom didn't have the best relationship, and I was mad at her for that. Right. And so I didn't really want to share with him, because then he would come in and be the rescuer to me. And you know what I mean? It was just.
Right. You were kind of stuck in the middle. That's a tough place to be.
Yeah. And I would say that that's a tougher thing for me to process through than what happened to me. You know what I mean? It's
right.
It was hard, but I'm working on self-forgiveness and letting it go. And it's getting there. Let me push to it. I'm going to go to acceptance and see if I can. Okay. Whoops. permanent reality. It was a relief when she died because the burden was gone, but the guilt was still there.
Right.
You know, the anger, fear, and guilt,
and the loss is there.
the loss too. Yeah, I think the loss. Probably need to get to the loss, rather than all the garbage I'm throwing at myself.
Let's
Anyway,
go ahead and go up at the very beginning and just walk through these a little bit, go through
Okay.
these just a bit for our audience. So the first one, the stages of grief. So the first one is denial, and let's see what that looks like. We have a little example on this. Let's look at the next. Okay. So denial can be looking like you're in shock or you're numb. You're, like I said, an ottoman. You're just going through life. You're just surviving. And an example would be that this can't be happening. And I remember feeling that when I was sitting and looking out the window of the hospital room where my husband was and thinking, this isn't real. This cannot be happening. I'm going to wake up from this nightmare.
yeah,
A person who just lost a loved one might be expecting to see or hear from them or continue expecting them at dinner, or you expect them to jump up out of bed and be able to be using their legs that they haven't been able to use,
Right.
and that's got to have been something that Richard was going through too, is not being able to accomplish the things that he wanted to accomplish. I know that's been difficult because he is a doer. He likes to be processing, and he's a task guy where he likes a job to do and going and doing it, and you have to rethink everything. You can't do it like you used to do it.
I remember when my father died. I used to call him every Friday right after dinner, and it took me about 2 or 3 months. I would pick the phone up on Friday.
Right.
And then I, or people that call and want to hear somebody's voicemail because they want to hear their voice.
Right.
That can be a part of denial because you're expecting them to be there.
Right.
Okay.
So next one is anger, I believe. And again, that anger doesn't have to make sense. I have a girlfriend who just lost her husband unexpectedly, and she's angry that he's gone. She's angry at him that she's left with trying to restore her life. And she loved him dearly, and they were wonderful life partners. And so it doesn't make sense. She's not really angry at him. She's angry at the situation where she's finding herself to be. But like I said, it doesn't anger and the emotion of fear and wondering what is my future going to look like.
Yeah. And it's very
typical. It's an emotion that we as humans have.
Right. And you very often want to blame someone.
Right. So anger is a pain of loss or fear of changes or feeling something like, why is this happening? Who's to blame?
Right.
A grieving person oftentimes lashes out at family members or health care providers. Why couldn't they fix him? Why couldn't you save his life? Those kinds of things.
Right. Which moves right into, well, if I'd only not gone to work today, or why did I let her take the car?
Yes.
Those kinds of things. You kind of question yourself of what if I could have done this? And again, who do I turn to? And it's just important to have somebody, and maybe at first it should be somebody anonymous, just so that you feel safe to really share, because sometimes you have to just let it out, and a family member might not be appropriate.
Right. There are grieving groups that you can go to, often associated with a church or whatever, a safe place to be able to go and be with people who are going through the same thing. Mm-hmm. So there are options for people to find that are a safe place to go.
Right. But I would say that, and maybe this is just me, maybe I'm weird, but sometimes I don't want to share personal stuff with people I know.
Right.
So if you feel funny about it, then find somebody anonymous. Because otherwise it'll just stay back.
Well, people that have a harder time being objective. They're more subjective because they are closer to the storyline. And you're right. Sometimes just having a safe person that you don't know is like a counselor or some kind of.
And they, the people that you love want you to be okay too. Right. So they might overfunction, and it's not always the best place.
Yeah.
So depression, so you can kind of go into a deep sadness fog, which kind of can immobilize you.
Mm-hmm.
I know that what happened to me, and this, I didn't tag it as depression, but one of the things after, I was left in a wheelchair is I didn't, even when I could, I didn't want to go places because I didn't want people to know I was in a wheelchair. I felt inadequate, and people don't feel that way, but I felt that way.
Right. Right.
I felt, I don't know if you call it shame, but just, I'm not the person I used to be.
I think it's embarrassment.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, because you're different.
right.
And that's a loss.
Right. And it's hard for you to come to that even on your own, realizing those changes that have happened. I just going back to depression. I remember when I was still working and I came home, and we had been going through all this stuff, and I was going through some stuff at work that was really challenging. And I remember just telling my husband, I love you. It's not about you. This is not about you, but I just can't be nice today.
Yeah.
And I just went to my room and I didn't come back out till the next morning because I needed to still process it and not try to put on a happy face, and still let somebody know. I didn't want to cause pain for somebody else because I was in a bad spot myself. And,
Well,
there's wisdom in finding a quiet place sometimes and just getting away from everything and everybody.
right.
To
Give yourself some space.
right.
Well, and I know that part of the loss of independence is having to depend on someone else. So
Right.
when I have something I want to do, I'm burdening Mike with it.
Right.
And that doesn't always feel good, because I'm one of those gadabouts. I'd rather go and be and do, and I really can't do that anymore. So, because I don't want, Mike has a life too.
Right.
So,
And as a caregiver, I think sometimes, it's been really helpful that Richard's got his own wheels now, because you can, as a caregiver, you may have had a plan of staying home and just doing some kind of project at home. And you kind of feel put upon because you don't want to try to do somebody else's life for them.
absolutely.
And that's a process. It takes a while to be able to find your rhythm on things like that.
And a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So then acceptance is just, what am I going to do? Sometimes it's acceptance. What am I going to do this week?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't get to look too much further than that. And I think acceptance is almost an attitude.
Yeah. And I would say that sometimes it's a day by day thing, Sue. Sometimes you can't even look that far down the road for the encapsulating the whole week, because sometimes it's just like, I got to get out of bed today. And what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And break things down into measurable moments that you can go forward with and not feel overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah. And I think that not to have expectations is healthy. Mm-hmm. I hate to say that because I'm a coach. I like people to set goals and stuff, but it can really ruin your happiness if you.
Well, I think you said an important thing. You talked about balance, and I also think you said something earlier about gratitude. When you look at the cup being half full instead of half empty, then you can find the pleasure in the small things in life, and you can realize that there's hope there, and that it looks different, and I can't sugarcoat it, but I also can be really grateful for the things that are going well in my life, and that's made a huge difference for both Richard and I in our storyline, is knowing, we can get through onto the other side of this, and it may be painful, but look at all the things that are going well for us.
Yeah, that's true. So, grief is a process. It's personal. Nobody goes through it the way you go through it, and the way you're going through it is just fine. And just know that there's support out there, and find your support. That's almost one of the first things you need to do, even if you're just in the denial stage. Find somebody that you feel comfortable and safe with.
Yeah.
And we've got a final quote that kind of sums it up well. Grief is like the ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing, and sometimes it's overwhelming. And all we can do is learn to swim. And that's, today, can I keep my head up and swim? That's good advice. So one takeaway from our conversation today, Sandy.
I'll probably a takeaway is that I probably haven't done the processing of my latest information, but I also don't feel devastated by it. So yeah, I think that we'll do this journey together in the next few weeks, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and don't hurry it. It's a process.
Right.
Take what, you shouldn't aim to get stuck, but you keep processing. My takeaway is that safe support person. I wish I would have done that sooner because it's very helpful, and I don't know why I shied away from it. I just
I think we hesitate because we don't want to bleed on other people.
Yeah. And I should have taken my own advice today and found somebody that wasn't, that was anonymous to everyone else, so that I would be able to process. So, all right. Thanks for joining us today. And we've got some people coming on another podcast today that are sharing their stories. So please check in. And I've got a lineup of people coming that are going to share their stories. So blessings to everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sue. Bye.
Bye-bye.